if I remember our street, and I look at the makeup of our street back then, I would say um, probably about 60% of the street was not of Asian origin.
Probably more than that, I think.
Probably more.
It's
Probably
more
more.
than
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Probably more. To be fair, most of them were quite old.
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, over that, so we had quite a mixed sort of you know
Demographics.
demographic
Yeah.
in our area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from what I remember, when my father first bought the house in Buxton Street, I think we paid about £250.
Yeah.
Right, which seemed a lot of money at that time, but now you look at it, you think, oh my god, people
should-
spend that out on a night out in a meal.
Yeah, you think, why didn't we buy 10, 15, 20 of those back then? But yeah, I mean, it's literally that. I think if I remember correctly, having spoken to my dad, I think we probably paid about £1,000 for our first house, which is next to nothing now, But
Yeah.
but it's good.
And I don't think many people had mortgages then either. They were bought in cash because they would save their money and they'd work hard in the factories and really, that was a huge stepping stone for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to remember, we had very simple lives then. It was just work and save, work and save, work and save. It wasn't about ordering on Deliveroo and Uber Eats every weekend and going on holiday and doing this and doing that.
So, which school did you go to, and what was the school life like then in those days? Because, you would probably be the only few Asian children in the school.
Yeah, so I mean, I remember going to my first primary school, which was Charnwood, and again, quite a mixed bag of kids there. It was very different to Charnwood now. So yeah, quite a mixed bag of kids there. It's good.
And where did you go to secondary school?
I actually ended up at Lancaster Boys. I travelled quite far out for school. I ended up at Lancaster Boys, and if I tell you that in my year group back then, I was about one of 5 or one of 6 Asian faces.
Yeah, well, I was a few years ahead of you.
Yeah.
And I went to Lancaster Boys
Oh,
as
you
well.
did as well, yeah.
So I'm a Lancaster Boys student
Yeah.
as well. And when I went there, it was a shock of my life because you went from a primary school which wasn't really that bad. You got on with life. But when we went to secondary school, wow, it was a shock to the system. I can tell you.
Yeah.
How did you find it?
Exactly that. It was a shock to the system. The first thing for me was a shock of having to travel so far to school and back every day. But then the actual makeup, the demographic, the friends that you made at school, very, very different to the security you had, the security blanket, the comfort blanket you had of going to school in Highfields, where you had some Asians there. Like I said, I was one of maybe 5 or 6 Asian faces in the whole year group. It was quite challenging, and I'll tell you something. It taught you to grow up quick, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly, when I look back at my first years at Lancaster Boys, I was a very small little boy at that time, and the amount of racist abuse, bullying, and everything else that you used to encounter was quite severe in some days. And it made you realise that we were living in a different country, and we were not really always welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember exactly having the same sort of experiences when I first moved there. But I think I decided very, very early on that I wasn't going to be a victim, and I'd fight back, and I didn't take it. And by the time I got to sort of the second year in or third year in, I started having a great time after that.
Yeah, no.
and I still meet up with many of the lads from Lancaster Boys, and they've done very, very well. I've got people sort of high up at the university in property circles. So I still bump into these people regularly, and we reminisce about some of the good times we had at Lancaster Boys, and it was good.
Yeah.
But you just had to get over that first little period of like you said, a little bit of hardship,
I think I was about 4 or 5 years, so you probably arrived while I was leaving at that kind of sort of time. And life was tough for people that in that era, because people found it difficult to associate with the Asian people generally at that time. There was a huge influx of people from Uganda, Kenya, and those countries. Did that cause an effect as well?
Yeah, we had the influx from Uganda and Kenya, and to be fair, I think they came with a different mindset to the guys that came from India and Pakistan originally. They came with the language, because they were taught in English in Africa, and second thing is they came from an entrepreneurial background. So although they potentially, a lot of them came with nothing, they knew how to make it, and they've made it previously. So they brought that skill set with them into Leicester, and I think they've been a phenomenal addition to Leicester.
Phenomenal addition, really. Yeah, it's really sort of energised Leicester in lots of different ways. Lots of people were working in the factories. Lots of ladies were working in the factories. Some people mentioned Leicester Typewriter Company and Imperial Typewriter Company, and then you've got Cora's. I know certainly my father, he worked at Cannon and Stokes for a while.
Exactly that one.
Yeah, Cannon and Stokes for a while. Lots of Asian people worked there. Yeah. So I mean, my father and your father must have been friends at that era.
Of course,
and all the whole sort of the group of people stick together at that time. So can you remember any of the other factories? I certainly remember Syston roller shutters as well.
Yeah. I mean, they're still going, aren't they, Syston roller shutters? But I tell you, the one that I remember is there used to be a clock factory on St Saviour's Road. Do you remember making wall clocks?
Yeah. I can't remember the name.
Was it Gent? Gent. I remember that one because I remember I had a few.
So if any of the listeners out there can remember the name of the clock factory on St Saviour's Road, we'd be grateful, because it's now bugging us now to think of the name. So you can text us in. Our number is 0774 8855 055 is our text number, or you can call in with the answer 0116 482 2086. So and there was lots of clothing factories. I remember Pick and Co. or E.W. Bryant.
Yeah.
There was the Richard Roberts.
Yeah.
Russell Kempton's. So many others. British Shoe Corporation was going strong.
Yeah.
And lots of sort of Asian people were getting jobs quite easily in those days, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And we were working really, really hard. And back then, you see, the work ethic was very different to the local people. So, for example, my dad used to work the night shift at Cannon and Stokes. I remember, and very, very soon after getting his job, and I have vague sort of recollections of it. Very soon after getting his job, he realised that he had the day free, and he became a market trader rather than sleeping. Yeah. So it was like market trading in the daytime, working at Cannon and Stokes at night, and just catching up with sleep in between wherever,
Yeah, I mean, that was the dedication of that generation. My mother worked on an overlocking machine. She'd work from home. She'd work from the factory, wherever they could. And I think that happened across the board with all the Asian families. Absolutely,
because it was it was a case of, well, we've just come from poverty. A lot of them did, and we didn't want to pass that on to our children. And it was for our sakes that they were doing this. It was so that we can get an education, and it was so that we can have a better start in life than they did.
When we talk about that generation, the sacrifices they made for their lives, for our lives, and for our sakes, when I certainly look back, and I know you do as well, we've talked about this many times, life was so tough. They didn't have luxuries of having a takeaway. They had to cook all their food.
Yeah.
They had to, there was no such thing as holidays. I remember my father went to Pakistan after about probably 15 to 20 years almost, something like that. And it was like a big occasion. You know, people would come and see you, or you're going to Pakistan, or you're going to India. It'd be like,
people put flower garlands on you, mate.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And can you remember people going for Hajj?
Yeah.
In the late 70s, early 80s. I remember in 79, my father and a group of his friends actually drove in a coach for Hajj. I think it was 79. And when they were when they were leaving, I think the whole street was blocked off. There must have been a good couple of hundred people out there to greet, because it was not just the novelty of someone going for Hajj. It was someone who was actually driving to Hajj, and they took a coach and they kitted it out inside.
Wow.
and they drove there. What an experience.
You see, I mean, people just take everything. We take everything for granted now. We just get, get on a plane. We travel the
Yeah.
world. People go to India or they go to different places for 3 days, 4 days, and I can still remember, the buzz of somebody hearing somebody, oh, he's going to Pakistan, or he's going to India, or he's going there, or he's going there, and it would be phenomenal. You'd think, did people actually go on holiday? Because I can't remember anybody going on a holiday anywhere.
Your holiday was going back home. As a kid, my holiday was going to stay at my uncle's house in London.
Yeah.
Summer holidays happen, and you go to your uncle's house.
You go to your uncle's house.
Yeah. I mean, try telling your kids to do that now.
No chance. No chance.
It's not going to happen. And I'll tell you something else that just sprung to mind is when someone came back from Pakistan or India. Can you remember the number of letters that used to come?
Yeah.
Huh?
Phenomenal.
It's a stack of letters that you were handing out to people. Yeah.
And I think he's also the sort of the part-time mailman. Effectively.
exactly. Part-time mailman. But yeah, I remember that, and people used to wait in anticipation for those letters.
Yeah, I mean, can you remember ever going to the seaside or Blackpool, Skegness, or anything like that? That didn't happen for me. I don't know about you.
It didn't happen for many years. I probably early 80s is when we started to sort of go out for day trips, and that was a treat.
Major treat.
Major treat. I mean, you talk about cooking at home. Forget about not having takeaways, just shopping. I mean, we go to our supermarkets now, and the shelves are stacked full of ethnic food products. Can you imagine back then?
Yeah. Can you remember, Haroon? On Buxton Street, when the first sort of Asian sweet mart opened.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a big sort of euphoria almost of thinking, oh, wow, this has happened here. And I can remember that shop, which was the Punima of Mombasa, when it opened. Before that, it used to be a furniture shop selling carpets and furniture.
That's before my time, but yeah.
Before your time. And on the other corner, there used to be an off-license. Yeah. And on the other corner, there was a butcher's.
Yeah.
Where the hardware shop is.
Yeah.
And where the news agencies, there was always a news agent. Right? So, and I can still remember when that opened and thinking, wow, we can get our samosas.
Awesome.
We can get awesome jalebi. Wow.
Do you remember the queues on a Saturday morning, Sunday morning, especially when there was a wedding in the city and people were coming from out of town? They were queues round the block, waiting to go and buy from Punima. Awesome.
And when you look at Leicester and you look at the streets like Evington Road and even Melbourne Road, how much have they changed in the last 30, 40 years in front of our eyes?
The change is phenomenal. If you remember back to the early 80s, and I can't remember exactly when, but there were actually riots on Melbourne Road.
Yes.
At St. Peter's, the shopping precinct. Yeah. And I remember we had a little shop property in Highfields, and we had to board it up just in case people came by and smashed the windows in. But can you imagine having riots in the early 80s to what it is now?
Yeah, to what it is now.
Yeah.
And I certainly know that you couldn't get halal food available. You couldn't get halal meat. There was very few shops at that time. I think the first one was on Berners Street, if I'm not mistaken, opposite the old school now.
Yeah.
And for people who were living further afield, it was really difficult.
It was very, very difficult, and people used to travel in all the way from Coventry and Nottingham to buy halal food, buy halal meat in particular.
Yeah, because there was just nothing available.
There was just nothing available. So yeah, it was scarce. Did you know what a burger was until you were about 16?
No. You just didn't. You couldn't eat because you knew it wasn't halal. There was no option.
Exactly. There was no option. So it was different.
I think nowadays most 16-year-olds live on burgers, and they have done for most of their lives.
Yeah, I think they're weaned onto burgers straight off milk.
So and one of the other things that I remember certainly, there's hardly any cars around.
Yeah.
Not many people had a car. If you had a car, I can remember one person on Matlock Street having a car, or there was a taxi rank at the bottom of Buxton Street, Mr. King, with his famous Russian-style hat, if I remember correctly. Do you remember any of those things?
I remember them distinctly, because I remember my dad having a green Cortina back then, and there was a Hillman. Do you remember Hillman?
Hillman Imp.
Y1, yeah. And I remember in the street there were about 6 or 7 cars, and likewise, going back all the way to sort of late 70s, there were actually very few houses with telephones. I remember in when we were in Duffield Street at my uncle's house, a couple of doors down, one family had a telephone, and all international calls used to come from there, and someone used to come and knock on the door and bring you out to answer the phone
5
call.
minutes later, come back in 10 minutes, your phone call is here.
Exactly.
We just take everything for granted.
It
You've got
completely.
mobile phones, you've got all the luxuries. You know, and I certainly remember that, you know, somebody was flying in from somewhere, and my dad said, "Oh, we've got to go and hire a taxi." And Mr. King went to Heathrow to pick these people up. And that must have been happening with you guys, you know.
And what an event! Like I said, it was Flower Garland time. You
Yeah.
know, it was what an event to pick someone up at the airport was a holiday or a day trip for us.
Yeah.
Forget the guy coming. So-
And you know, I actually think, you know, people didn't have money in those days, but there was lots of muhabbat, lots of, you know, fellowship amongst everybody to help each other. You know, lots of times there was issues or somebody struggling, and
Yeah.
people would rally around to support them all the time.
Yeah, because when you're in a common position, when you have so much in common with a small group of people, you have no choice but to support each other, help each other, and it's regardless of religious background as well, because it was very, very tight, and you needed each other. Then, as those sort of communities grew themselves, and each family grew themselves, and the family unit itself and the extended family unit became so big that you're almost like a subsector of that community in itself. You started to lose touch with much of that. But back then, yeah, it was very close.
When I was growing up, I can certainly remember one occasion when somebody, my mum and dad, one of their friends had a fire, and they said, "Look, we've got to go and help them." So they filled up a shopping trolley from the house
Yeah.
of beans and stuff like that. And I'm remembering as a child thinking, "But we haven't got anything.
Yeah.
What are we going to give?" And half our food went into the shopping trolley. Walked all the way from where we used to live, a couple of miles, to somebody's house, and gave them all this food to help them out.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just, that's what you did.
Yeah.
It's just what you did, and you didn't think twice about it.
Nobody thought twice about it.
Nobody thought twice about it. And but like I said, we were all in a common place then, and we had to support each other. And actually, like you said, the muhabbat was much sort of, the bonds were much stronger then.
And I think actually that generation had a huge.
But we've kept that, haven't we, Zaf?
Yeah, we have.
Our
kept
bonds
it.
are strong.
Yeah, our bonds are strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that generation had that X factor.
Yeah.
They had that X factor in their kinship with their fellow human beings.
Yeah.
Humanitarianism came first. And
Yeah.
they made the sacrifices, not just for us, but for the community, wider community as well.
100%. And if I look at some of the relationships my dad had with people in the community, I could never have those. You know, I could never achieve that level of, bondship. It just can't happen. We're so busy with our own lives, and we're so busy with work and all the material things in life that sometimes we forget about the non-material things. You know,
It's sad.
it is sad.
It is sad.
It is
But
sad.
you know, we've got to live with the life that we can do,
Yeah.
and you know, and pray for them, and you know, for the
Exactly.
sacrifices that they made, and may Allah grant them all Jannat. And
Well, it's that whole generation, not just individually our parents, but that whole generation and the sacrifices they made. It has resulted in the good life that we've got today.
We're standing on their shoulders
100%.
from our previous forefathers and all
100%.
the generations living in Leicester in the 60s and 70s, because they really did the
Yeah,
sacrifices.
absolutely.
Yeah. And Haroon, you know, after you came out of school and you know, your father was in business or doing market trading, what did you do? What did you want to achieve, and how have you achieved it as well?
Well, after school and college, I went on to university, and I studied economics. And again, going back to university in those days, it was quite a novelty thing, even amongst the family, the extended family, even in the community, regardless of what you're doing. The fact that you went to university, wow,
Wow,
yeah,
it's a big thing.
wow. And I did university, and pretty much straight after graduating, Zaf, I went straight into business with my first business, and onwards and upwards from there.
Yeah, and now you Everest Dairies, which you've just recently sold for,
Yeah.
to a larger company. You've got Brew. You've got several other businesses.
Yeah.
You know, what's the driving factor? And you know, it's hard work that you've put in.
Yeah, yeah, and the hard work, the work ethic is the legacy that generation left behind for us. You know, how do you put that effort in? How do you put that work in? And it's a fear I have for the next generation, in fact. Will they be able to do what we did? You know, were we able to do what our parents did? And I hope they work smarter than harder. But yeah, it's been a lot of work, and but yeah, these are lessons that I learned from my dad. You know, the night shift, the day shift.
Yeah, I mean, as a businessman, you have to be prepared to put the extra hours in.
It's a must win situation. You know, you've got to put everything in that you possibly can.
Yeah, and you're now a very successful businessman.
Thank you.
You have a nice house. You've got a nice car. You are one of the role models for people in Leicester.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just great to see so many great role models in Leicester. To say actually hard work does pay, and perseverance does pay, and the fact that you remember your roots as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, my motivation in life has never been money. Money is always a byproduct. Yeah, and the good lifestyle is a byproduct. But you know, to give you an idea, our current sort of employment role is sitting on about 550 people. We employ about 550 people up and down the country, and I take that very responsibly. You know.
Yeah, we've got a message coming in. The hearts were big, even though the homes were small.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a really valid point. Now homes are big, but the hearts are small. New homes are big, but hearts are small. Such a great message. Thank you very much for that message. Really appreciate it. It does sound really so true. You know, that's how I feel, you know.
Exactly that. But, you know, at little micro levels, that mohabbat and that relationship and that kinship and that bondship still remains at micro levels. It's just that it doesn't feel as if it's community-wide.
Yeah, it's not community-wide as much.
Yeah.
But, you know, Haroon, I hope you stay on after the break. We're just going to a break, and we've got Mira Ben Trivedi, who's used to be a BBC Radio Leicester presenter, coming on with us. You're listening to Radio Ramadan on 87.9 FM. We'll be joined after the break by Mira Ben Trivedi from BBC Radio Leicester, who used to be a presenter there. So please join us and listen in, and hope you're enjoying the show. alaikum, brothers and sisters. You're listening to Radio Ramadan on 87.9 FM. I'm your host for this show, looking back at Leicester over the last 40, 50 years. My name's Zuffar Haq. We've been speaking to Haroon Sheikh, who's kindly come into the studio, and we've been listening to what life was like for him growing up in the 70s and 80s in Leicester. But if you've got any comments, please send us a text message. 077 488 55055 is our text number. That is, I'll repeat it again, 077 488 55055. Or you can call into the studio on the studio number, which is 0116 482 2086. And now we're being joined by Hina Trivedi, who's a local GP. Good morning to you, Hina. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, Zuffar, and Ramadan Kareem to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Hina. You grew up in Leicester. How did you come to Leicester, Hina? And what was your first early experiences of coming into Leicester?
So I was a 7-year-old when I came here in the 70s, so now you know how old I am. But we came in the 70s. We were really very lucky because we came just before Idi Amin expelled all the Asians, and my father had a really good premonition, had an uncle who lived here. So we'd come to look at Leicester in about late 60s and moved over. And I mean, I went to junior school, then I went...
Which junior school did you go to?
So oh my gosh, I've just gone blank now. Northfield House Primary School,
Okay.
Right.
which is actually which was one of the premier schools at that time, because we had a swimming pool in the school.
Wow.
Not many schools had a swimming pool.
Lucky you, Hina. Lucky you.
Well, some of the schools don't have them now. Lots of them don't have them.
That's right.
Well,
And
do
we don't
many?
really-
None of them do. Yeah.
No, very few do, and Northfield House did. So that's where I grew up, Gypsy Lane, near where the Swaminarayan Temple is now. So previously, at that time, that was the car driving set.
I passed my test there, by the way.
Yeah. So did I.
Me too. Yeah, so that's where I grew up, and then at those years we had the 11 plus until the Conservative government came in and closed all the grammar schools down. So I was lucky enough to pass my 11 plus and went to one of the grammar schools. Then all the grammar schools were abolished, and then I went to do my A levels at QE, and QE still exists.
Wow.
So we just in Queen Elizabeth, and obviously went off to university and so on. But Leicester's my home.
Excellent.
Yeah, and how you went to QE. What was life like back then? Was there many Asian people around, and did you experience any racism towards you?
There was a lot of racism, actually. I would say, I remember, this is a really horrible memory. I remember actually riding my bike and being accosted by, other nationalities and being called a Paki and so on. So I have grown up with that. And, you realize very quickly that, look, if you want to progress in the world, you've got to be better and smarter and work harder. And so that's what I tried to do. I studied really hard, got into university. And I mean, I shouldn't really, this is really difficult to say, but I remember I had aspirations of going to Oxbridge, and definitely I wasn't in that Oxbridge category. The school had almost groomed who they were going to send to Oxbridge. I wasn't in that category, but I carried on and still went off to university. And even in university, I know that when I was applying for jobs, I did feel a little sense of racism. I mean, you hate playing the race card, and I really don't like it. But in those days, if you wanted to be a consultant in the NHS, very, very few Asian consultants. It was almost impossible.
But Hina, I think the main thing is you didn't give up. You didn't play the victim card. You fought through it, and what an impact you're having on our society and our community now. And we need these role models.
Raised my parents, everything. But I have to say one thing: it is amazingly different now. Do you know what? I've lived in different countries, and I have to say England is probably one of the most progressive, anti-racist countries that I've found. When I talk to patients and I talk about Indian culture and so on, all my Caucasian colleagues, they know what Diwali is, they know what ghee is, they know what samosas are. I've worked in America for many years, and you would not believe that they wouldn't even know what Indian people were, Indian, Pakistani or Bangladeshi. They had no idea what the differences were. We're really culturally aware in this country.
Absolutely.
Now, things are much more meritocratic. If you want to progress in your career, there's so many more, Asian consultants and so on. I have to say, things have really changed.
It's the other way around almost with the consultants. It's odd when you see somebody other than an Asian person who's a consultant. When I certainly go in, I think, oh wow, there is some people who are still consultants.
Yeah.
There is a huge in the NHS. There's a huge Asian presence, and actually it's the same in America and in England. If all the Asian doctors were to withdraw, the system would collapse.
Yeah.
We actually are totally dependent on so many, not just Asian doctors, but nurses, even the ground staff, everything. I have to say, we really are a truly integrated community, and I'm really, really proud to say that.
But we can say that now because we've seen the other side of it. We have all seen the other side of it. We saw it 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And actually, part of that drive that we have, certainly for Haroon and I think for you, is the fact that actually we were better than that, and we wanted to say, actually, we can deal with this. We're gonna do better and work harder and make sure that we make a difference. And you have.
And it's all about ignorance. Absolutely right. We needed to work hard to prove ourselves, and probably work doubly hard and achieve double the amount to get to a similar position. But you know what? It was just really based on ignorance. I'll give you an example. I'll give you two examples. I remember the National Front came into our school to canvass. Can you believe that? They would never let that happen.
Yeah.
But they actually came into my school. I was at Newark Girls Grammar School, and I remember them coming in. And I had, several Caucasian friends. And I remember one of them, I won't name the name, obviously confidentiality. She turned around and she said to me, "Oh, Hina, you're different, but it's the rest of them." And I said, "No, I'm the same.
Yeah.
I'm brown as well." I'm sure you have similar
Exactly.
similar examples.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I was in America one time. I was moving from West Virginia, very, very, I would say not a culturally diverse state. I was always called the Chinese doctor. I mean, I don't even eat Chinese. But I thought, is that the only restaurant they have, or at least foreign restaurant? But I actually was going to move to Atlanta, and one of my very good patients who only chose to come to me, only saw me, she actually used a really derogatory term when I moved to Atlanta, and she said, "You are not going there. That is full of blank, 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 blank." And I thought, how could you say that to me? And again, she said, "Oh, you're different. It's just the rest of them." And I thought, you know what? When they look at me, they didn't actually see a brown person. They just see a doctor.
Yeah.
When my friend, when I was 14, looked at me, she saw a friend. She didn't see the brown person. And this is what it is. It's based on ignorance. And hopefully with education now, that, and we are much more diverse, we're much more open. People aren't as bigoted.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. But anyway, look, let's talk about your mum.
Yes.
We don't want to talk about you anymore. Let's talk about
The famous.
My mum is my role model. All my parents
fantastic.
are my role models.
Yeah, fantastic.
My mum was the first Asian DJ to speak in English. So there were Hindi speaking programs, but then the BBC decided that they wanted to have another program at 6 o'clock. So the adverts went out. She applied for the job and so on. And she got the job, and it was her and Don Kotak were the two initial
So
presenters.
in this case, race was an advantage because she got the job because she was actually.
Possibly. So they wanted to, I think, appeal to the other community, and so probably that's what happened. But in those days, when she first started the radio show, she would play ABBA and Michael Jackson as well as Indian songs.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just all pure Bollywood.
Yeah.
And it's so cute. She used to have this huge fan mail, because in those days it was all writing in. And very soon, BBC realised that they got more fan mail for that 1 hour show than they did for the whole week.
Because it was the only 1 hour show.
Yeah, it was.
Yes, it was a 6 o'clock show.
6 o'clock show. I can still remember my father listening in every day. It was a weekly show to start off with, then every day to the 6 o'clock
right.
show, and listening to all the presenters and saying, and the radio would be on, blaring away really loudly, and because that was the only sort of information about India, Pakistan, or the subcontinent, or the rest of the world, and the only music, and the only shairi as well, and different sort of poetry.
That's right, songs and news they got to hear.
Yeah.
And you're right, it was just once a week, and then it became, so my mum was on a Monday, Don was on a Thursday, and then they slowly increased it. Got Mike Holbert, Vijay Sharma, Rabia Raza, all those other presenters came in. And then Vijay Sharma got on to produce the show. She was actually a presenter initially after my mum, and Vijay, who's still around, of course, became the producer.
So these were the beginnings of the Asian Network, really, isn't it?
That's right. Then it became the Asian Network, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
So can you imagine? Mirabem Taredi was involved right at the start of the BBC Asian Network, which is now a huge sort of radio station now in comparison.
Yeah.
That's right, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. We got to meet lots of film stars through that. You know, we got to meet Amitabh Bachchan and Zeenat Aman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So we've got all these photographs with all these film stars. We were so lucky.
Very lucky. Very lucky.
Very lucky, yeah. I mean, and Hina, how was life in those days? You know, we were talking about the first Asian sweet mart opening in Highfields and on Buxton Street. Did you find food was difficult, and did your mom find that difficult, or you know, did that ease over time? And jobs.
Yeah. In those days, actually, really food was cooked at home. We didn't really go out to eat. First of all, you couldn't really afford to go out, and it was just, you know, something that was really we certainly didn't do that at all.
Don't think anybody did. No.
Yeah. And then, you know, when you go to India and you suddenly think, my gosh, everybody else goes out. How can we not do that? And, you know, it's very restricted for girls. I think girls had a very difficult time. So I was very lucky that my parents, particularly my father, was very, very strict that we should be educated. I had a lot of girlfriends who they had to come home and cook all the dinner, and education wasn't a priority in their family. Now, hopefully, that's better. But you know, in those days, everybody was really trying to hold on to their culture, whether it was right or wrong. And you know, there's lots of agony as well behind the scenes. You know, with relationships and dating and so on. So there was a lot of that as well. But, you know, together with that, I have to say it was a much more simple life, and it was a happy life.
Yeah.
You know, we got together with families and relatives, and, you know, the mass cooking going on, and everybody was to help everyone. My mom had amazing friends. She started also something called the Leicester Asian Ladies Circle. And this was really nice because she had Parveen auntie Ibadullah, she was her Muslim friend, and she had a Punjabi friend, Saraj Seth. You may know all these names.
I know those names, yeah.
And then Gulshan Ahmed, who is, again, these are my Gulshan auntie, Saraj auntie, Parveen auntie, you know. These four women were absolute pioneers in the city, because what they did was they decided to form a Leicester Asian Ladies Circle. And since then, lots of other Asian groups have started. And what their aim was to bring the Indian woman out of the home. So they would get together once a week. They would arrange things like flower arranging classes and you know, different things. And then they put on these shows once a year, you know, with just broadcasting and celebrating India, all the different states, a fashion show and so on. And it was truly remarkable. When I look at how pioneering you know, Gulshan auntie, Parveen auntie, my mum was. It's amazing.
It is pioneering. And, you know, just one thing struck to mind. Do you remember weddings back then?
Yes.
Do you remember cooking for weddings back then?
Yes, I do, yeah.
big.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what would happen in those days, as far as I can remember, is you'd have somebody in the community who's some kind of chef.
Yeah.
You'd be, the night before, the rest of the family members would be joining, cutting the onions, chopping everything, getting everything ready, and there'd be Wesley Hall or somewhere else like that, and it would be a mass wedding, feeding a few hundred people out of these pots. There was no health and safety in those days. There was no restrictions, so people and that's what people used to do.
Absolutely right. Yeah, weddings in the universities and church halls and so on. It's right. I mean, it was. Like I said, it was a much simpler life. There was no gadgets. There's no such thing as mobile phones. That came so many years later. Yeah. But even TV, we have 3 channels: BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, have you seen? I mean, I know you've got practices. You're a GP. You've got practices around Evington Road and also Belgrave Road. But can you remember the changes in both roads, like Evington Road and Belgrave Road?
Definitely. Oh, definitely. Look, it's transformed. I mean, not even just Evington Road and the Golden Mile, but even look at the Haymarket, and look at the Shires didn't exist, High Cross didn't exist, the Curve didn't exist. We just had Dimmockford Hall, and we had the Phoenix Theatre. That's we went to see pantomimes at the Phoenix Theatre and so on. So
We also had Granby Halls.
Yes.
yes,
We also
yeah,
had Evington Cinema.
Yeah.
We also had Upsara. We had.
Granby Hall's the skating. Do you
I remember that. I remember that. Yeah.
And the big, so for me, Navratri was a big thing. So
Yeah.
Granby Halls was where the big Navratri was.
That's
Everyone
right.
goes
Yeah.
there for
Yeah.
photographs and
I
so on.
remember. Yeah.
That's been a
No,
car park a long
I think
time.
the cinemas. I think the cinemas are an important thing because I don't know if you remember. So one of the things that the Hindu girls would do is they do this fast for 5 days,
Yeah.
and then the last night you'd stay up all night, the Jagran.
Yeah.
So then the cinemas would be on all night showing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can remember the Asian entertainment, sort of that element of it, was renting a video recorder.
Yeah. Yes.
Video recorder, and then renting the VHS tapes,
Absolutely.
right? So, and that was the entertainment for the Asian community, for all these famous films that used to come around. And actually,
That's right.
it also automatically be a cinema in somebody's house. Always hide a video recorder. They've hired a video, and everybody would go around to watch this movie.
That's
Yeah.
right, because it's legal. So, well, first of all, I remember the cinemas. I mean, where Sari Mandir is now, there was a big cinema there.
Yeah.
And then in Evington Road, there was cinemas there, and that's what we used to. That was like the highlight, wasn't it? And of course, when you go to the cinema, you wouldn't buy popcorn or anything because you couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
Now, it's a great treat. You go there, get your Coke, your nachos, your popcorn, and everything. and then came the VHS. I remember the precursor of VHS was just cinema.
People just didn't have money for holidays. They didn't have money for these kind of luxuries. And actually, if you think about it now, we take it for granted. We just think, we can do this, we can do this. But life was really, tight and poor, and it was more about providing a food on the table and paying the rent and paying the bills was the number one priority for those communities. And really, that generation made those huge sacrifices.
Right. I've got a message come through here now. It says, "Did you have a shell suit?
Did I have a?
One of those shell suit tracksuits?ts?" And you, Zaf.
I think I did.
I'm sure Zaf had a purple one. Do you have a purple one?
Yeah, a purple one. Yeah. Of course, made locally in Leicester, no doubt.
Of course.
No, I couldn't afford to have a set tracksuit. A matching tracksuit, top and bottom, no way.
A bit of a
I
mix
tell you
of
what
it.
I did have though. I only had 2 pairs of shoes when I was at medical school.
Yeah.
So I think I'd have a black pair and a brown pair. So brown would be the boots and black would be the shoes, or the other way around. And trainers, and that's it. And honestly, now you would have like 50 pairs of shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. We're coming to the end of the show, so I'm just going to ask you quickly to say Eid Mubarak to our listeners, because this is the sort of one of our last opportunities. So I'll go to Hina first.
Well, I'd like to say Eid Mubarak to all of my patients, all my friends. I've got 2 or 3 particular good friends, Praveen, Yusuf, and Renaz, if you're listening in. Yusuf, I have to say, he encouraged me to fast. He gave me the confidence to try one of the Ramzan fasts, which I did, and I've got to give him all the credit.
Okay, we've got 20
big Eid
seconds.
Mubarak to everybody.
So, Harun?
Right, Eid Mubarak to everyone. It's been a fantastic Ramadan, and coming to a close very, very soon. Wish it was carrying on for a bit longer, but Eid Mubarak, everyone.
Thank you, Harun, and thank you to both of you for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. And Eid Mubarak to all the listeners out there, everybody, and I hope you have a great day.